Good afternoon, Chair Calcagno and members of the Board of Supervisors. My name is Glenn Robinson. I'm a candidate for Town Council for the new Town of Carmel Valley. The primary purpose of Measure G, the creation of the Town of Carmel Valley, is to allow residents of Carmel Valley to have a choice in how their community is developed and shaped for our children and their children. Right now, our voice has essentially disappeared with predictable consequences. Carmel Valley represents only 1/7 of one supervisorial district, 1/7 of 1/5. We have reached a point of having taxation without representation. With our Town of Carmel Valley, 5 locally elected volunteer town council members will make land use decisions for Carmel Valley. This will dramatically improve representation and civic participation and give us leadership that is more responsive to local needs and more aware of local sentiments about critical issues, especially development. Please recall, this board has outvoted our elected representative on many critical Carmel Valley development projects, although you are not accountable to us, the people of Carmel Valley. Taxation without representation. With incorporation, all 5 decision makers will be from Carmel Valley and will be accountable to every single voter in Carmel Valley. If they are not doing their job, they will be voted out of office. That is not the case today. We have to accept poor decisions made by this board with no recourse. I can't vote for you, Mr. Chairman, nor any other opponent you might have. How much development in Carmel Valley is too much, especially given our severe traffic and water problems? And who should decide about this development? May I remind you that 1,183 housing units are already approved for Carmel Valley, on the books to be built. They represent an increase of about 20% of our current housing stock. Another 1,052 units are currently in the planning process, representing an increase of another 20% of our housing stock. Together, along with other recently approved projects, these developments will generate about 28,000 new daily car trips. That represents an increase of well over 50% in total traffic in Carmel Valley. Such traffic congestion in our narrow river valley not only degrades our quality of life and our environment, but represents a danger to public health and safety. Imagine having to evacuate Carmel Valley in times of flood or fire. Imagine trying to get an ambulance to community hospital during rush hour. Imagine trying to pull out onto Carmel Valley Road during those momentary lapses in the lines of traffic. May I remind the board that just 2 months ago, county staff came to Carmel Valley to explain why they were seeking to weaken traffic standards in Carmel Valley to allow significantly more traffic. It was to facilitate, quote, new development, their slideshow said, tourism industry growth, business expansion. These are all quotes in black and white. No one asked the people of Carmel Valley how we felt about more traffic congestion. It is just being imposed upon us. That's what it's like without local control. Simply put, Mr. Chairman, big development interests have far too much influence over the planning process. The threat of overdevelopment of Carmel Valley is directly due to the fact that we do not have local control. Taxation without representation. That is why we need a town. Why are we gathered here today, Mr. Chairman? It is because big developers have tried to stop us from voting. Despite the fact that 4 LAFCO fiscal analyses have all shown what common sense will tell anyone with a brain, that Carmel Valley pays far more in taxes than we get back in services, and thus can well afford to run our own town when those tax dollars stay local, we are still called here today to prove the obvious. Honorable Supervisors, who is Frank Lunding, the reason for this hearing? Who is this man who has filed 2 ridiculous lawsuits and 1 federal complaint, all trying to stop us from voting, wasting taxpayer dollars in the process? He has utterly failed to stop the vote. We will be voting on November 3rd. But he did manage to talk you into holding this hearing. Who is Mr. Lunding? Simply put, he is a front for big developers, especially those who want to build a 300-house subdivision at Rancho Cañada in the floodplain of the Carmel River at the mouth of Carmel Valley. That conclusion may sound harsh, but there is a track record here. Mr. Lunding is at the center of a political scandal in Orange County for funneling over $100,000 in big developer monies into the 2008 Irvine elections to effectively buy an election for developers of the Great Park development, one of the largest developments in Orange County history. Please see the Orange County Register, September 5th, September 9th, and October 28th, 2008, for further details of this scandal. As a result of his questionable activities, Mr. Lunding had a Fair Political Practices Commission complaint lodged against him. And now Mr. Lunding has moved his operation from Orange County to Carmel Valley to play the same role as front man for big developers. This time he is working with Tony Lombardo, the land use attorney to most of the biggest developers in Monterey County over the past couple of decades. A man deeply involved himself in the Rancho Cañada subdivision, shown on the screen, and a man who has also worked hard to try to stop us from voting. This hearing, I must conclude, is not a serious look at the town's finances, which have been studied more than any other incorporating community in California's history, but rather is a blatant attempt by Mr. Lunding and the developers he represents to mislead Carmel Valley voters and dissuade them from voting yes on Measure G, to take control of land use decisions, to stop overdevelopment. It only goes to show just how important local decision-making is for Carmel Valley.